Okay, welcome back to the big question. Our guest tonight, Cabinet Secretary Devolution Anne Waiguru. Let's first start at looking at your feedback. We've been asking you whether Anne Waiguru, after the alleged scandal at NYS, should step aside, as some sectors have been calling for that. Ugas Ahmed too says on Twitter, don't know whether it is by default or design. Waiguru is yet to extend the transformation to counties in Northeastern Province. Okay, she'll explain that at some point. Brian Haniri, if there is a sin Ms. Waiguru has committed, it is to roll out a program geared towards creating jobs for our youth. Kennedy Obiero, Cabinet Secretary Anne Waiguru has done a wonderful job both in NYS and Huduma centers. The Pimpala, ask Waiguru why nobody at NYS has stepped aside to allow for investigations. Won't they obstruct the investigations? And Anthony Merisia, no, Madam Waiguru has transformed NYS a lot, so people fighting her are only doing so for political reasons. I'll look at about 2 on 22422. We have Charles in Kiambu saying the only way out of this Waiguru saga, let those demanding probe on her forward any evidence they have against her to the relevant institutions instead of going rounds that amount to nothing but politics. And Joan Ngatu Ngong, yes, Waiguru should step aside. If her fellow cabinet secretaries were asked to step aside without even being told the accusations leveled against them, why not her? Or is she more special? Well, thank you so much. Keep texting us on 22422 on Twitter. Use the hashtag The Big Question. Cabinet Secretary Anne Waiguru, thank you so much for making time for the big question tonight. You've been away for quite a while. In Sri Lanka, we gathered receiving awards.
Colombia.
In Colombia. Oh, I had Colombo. So I thought it was in Sri Lanka. Colombia. Well, it's good to have you back. How was it there? And being there, I'm sure you heard of the storm that you left behind here. How did you deal with that?
Thanks, Hussein, for having me here today. I think it's important that we clear the air on matters of NYS. But we were in Colombia, at least for brighter things. We won the first place in the world for public service transformation. And it's a UN award. It's the most prestigious award, actually, and so we're very happy to have been identified as for the reforms that we have been doing. Hussein, Huduma Kenya, apart from winning the award at the UN, was also rated #1 in Africa by APAM, which is also the public administration institution that evaluates all country submission. For the UN award, we won #1 out of 800 entries from across the world. So we're very, very happy about that. And that's what we had gone to do in Medellin, Colombia.
In Colombia.
Yes.
Well, congratulations. And we wish you the best in what you do. But, of course, you left a storm back home. You've come to the storm again. You appeared before a joint parliamentary committee today. In fact, just tell me, how was it for you? We saw the chaos in Parliament. How was it for you sitting there?
Interesting.
That is what you'll say.
Yes.
Okay. There have been calls for you to step aside. We haven't heard from you about that, responding to that yet. Are you going to step aside? Has that crossed your mind? You've had people talk about that?
Okay. Hussein, people don't step aside because they've been asked to step aside by people in the streets. What happened is that I am the whistleblower on a fraud that was attempted at NYS. How that then is turned around to ask the whistleblower to step aside is something that personally I have not been able to put my mind around. And so if you ask me concerning that issue, basically the issue is that it has absolutely nothing to do with me. We were the ones who actually called the CID to investigate an attempted fraud on an NYS, and for that you cannot ask a minister to step aside. Even if you look at the list of the people who stepped aside during the corruption list, you will find that there are very many, other than the CSs, there are very many other officers from all ministries who steps aside. So it depends on whether the individual has been directly linked to... Yes. So you cannot say that you step aside because there is corruption in your ministry. You cannot actually guarantee that there can be an institution that will be completely without any level of impropriety. And if you say that the head steps aside just because there is impropriety, not necessarily whether they have done anything about it or whether they participated in it, I mean, I think that would be completely missing the point.
Fair enough what you're saying, but many would argue Here is the president a while ago, 2-3 months ago, setting the bar too high in terms of integrity. And I'll read now a text from, is it Ahmed in Garissa? No, actually it's Hashim Isaac, who says Waiguru should step aside. She is not exceptional. If there are corruption allegations in her docket, the best thing is for her to just step aside to pave way for investigations. I have one more here. Nelson from Kiambu says Cabinet Secretary Charity Ngilu was a whistleblower and she was forced to step aside. Is Waiguru more special than other cabinet secretaries? Why double standards?
I think I don't want to discuss the issue of other CSs, because that's really not in my place, and none of us is really familiar with the cases that have to do with them. I think the only thing that I can respond to is my issue and the principle that we understand that have to do with governance and the principles of governance. There is absolutely, as I said, Hussein, no institution in this country right now that is not touched one way or another by corruption. None whatsoever, including EACC itself, you know. So you have an institution with over 8,000 officers and 30,000 servicemen. There is likely to be impropriety. If you go right now to PPOA, for example, they're investigating quite a number of complaints that have to relate with either alleged procurement procedures, etc. But you have not seen those particular ministers stepping aside because they're not necessarily linked to it, or even the heads of those institutions. And so the issue is not that because there is, the issue is politicized. I think this issue of NYSME has really been blown out of proportion, because it's actually not even on this particular matter of the investigation for the 826. We actually haven't even lost any money. We saw an attempted fraud that we stopped, and on that we called CID, and calling CID does not necessarily mean that then you're the one who steps aside. If we do that, there'll be nobody in office, not just in government but also in the private sector.
So you don't agree that that shouldn't be the case? You can step aside because
I think there are standards. There is a benchmark and there are standards, and I think the institutions responsible for it carry out investigations and then make those recommendations.
Okay.
Yes.
Like you said, you say you're a whistleblower in this. You talked to the CID and invited them to come and carry out investigations. But first of all, there was a Central Bank of Kenya letter written to the Devolution Ministry. This preceded your action.
Okay. Hussein, it's amazing the way when a lie is told very many times that it actually starts sounding like the truth. Let me tell you about the Central Bank letter. The Central Bank letter has absolutely nothing to do with the 826. I don't know whether you'll believe that. We have the letters here and the files, and we carried them to Parliament. Now, the Central Bank letter was a letter that the Central Bank wrote to the ministry, asking the ministry to clarify about details of a payment, of a specific payment for a certain supplier in the ministry. Now, the reason Central Bank wrote was because that individual's bank had actually said, this person has not transacted in this amount of money before, and therefore we have seen a payment that has come from government of this nature, and so we needed to clarify that it's actually a legitimate payment. That is just a normal procedure for banks, the KYC, know your customer. If today, Hussein, you wrote me a check of 1 million shillings, they will call to find out whether that check is actually supposed to be coming from me, to me, and why you're paying me 1 million shillings, because you don't usually transact between me and you with that kind of money. In fact, if I write a check today of more than 750, you will be asked by your bank to clarify. So that was the nature of the clarification. It actually has absolutely nothing to do with the funds under investigation or the transaction of 826. And I think it's important that I clarify that, because what has happened is that there's a lot of media allegations and words being thrown around, and so we mix them all up and start saying then there is corruption. And that's why it's important. There are allegations in the media which we're willing to address, which we have actually prepared to address, and then there is actually the fact of the investigation, which is the 826.
And I'm coming to that shortly.
Yes.
But from our source, the CBK was actually questioning the huge amounts of payments that were being made.
And I'm telling you, it is inaccurate, because I have the letter here, unless you have another letter. They asked about one particular bank account and one payment. So I need that to be clear. It's one. And we have similar letters that they write.
One payment to one company?
Yes. to one company. And you know very well that we've opened, let me give you an example, we've opened quite a number of 30% youth procurement, right? And so many youth are getting into businesses that they've never done before. And so even if you're going to pay them 5 million shillings and the account used to have 20,000, 30,000, 100,000, the bank will call to ask, please confirm, especially if the payment is coming from a government institution, they will say confirm that they actually should be paid this amount of money. So that was the nature of the question. And it was for one farm, Hussein, one farm. So and it is in line with the Know Your Customers principles.
Policy. Okay.
Yes.
If then, like you say, you're a whistleblower, and I'm not taking that away from you, I mean, in all fairness, why then was your statement or statement to the media retaliatory? Or why did you talk after these allegations were made by the opposition that there is a scandal brewing at NYS? That is when now you came out and say that I have gone to the CID and wrote about this. Why didn't you talk about it earlier?
We do this all the time, Hussein. In government all the time, you are checking on things, you're asking for investigations all the time. Anytime you do investigations, you don't go to the media. The only reason we respond to the media is because we saw there was a story now brewing which had misinformation and we needed to clarify. That was the only reason. If it actually hadn't gone to the media, we would just have continued with normal investigations. I'll tell you why. Every day in government, every day, there are reports that come of all manner. And every day we do investigations, we check, we audit, but we don't go to the media to call press statements. You only do that if there is an allegation that has gone to the public domain that you need to clarify before it gets out of hand. So that was the only reason why we went out. Otherwise, if it actually hadn't been, in fact, if they hadn't started talking about CBK, which was an outright lie, by the way, unless they can show us the letter. Because if you notice, for that particular allegation, there was no letter that was given. And in fact, CBK did not write a letter, they wrote an email. And then they asked for documents, and they were given the documents.
There was
and
a response.
Yes, there was a response. Yes.
Right. Let's talk about the 826 million then. The figure now currently under investigation is 826 or 665 million. If you could just clarify.
According to the CID, after I wrote asking them to investigate 820. 800.
Yeah, it's okay. Over 800 million.
Yes.
Okay.
And they clarified that there had been a transaction that they cleared as having been legitimate amongst the 820 of about 133 million. And so they have been left with about 655, which they need to clarify, which is the ones that goes to those 4 farms of the individuals that are under investigation.
The problem, for the sake of your viewers, the problem here was somebody used the password, if that is the correct word used, I don't know if that is the word he used, of the senior deputy director general to try and make these payments, isn't it?
Yes, to make commitments into the system.
To make commitments into the system so that, I mean, the process can go on and these companies can get paid.
Yes. So the actual investigation actually is on the use of the password. You know very well that if you take somebody's password for a financial transaction, that amounts to fraud. Right. Right? Right. So the investigation is not so much that we've lost money because we haven't. It's actually who used that password. Okay. Yes. But this money was 828 million. Yes. So how is it that 133 million was paid if this was a problem? Okay, when you're doing a transaction in a system, what would happen is that you can have legitimate transactions that have already gone through a certain approval process, and that's what they separated. When I reported, he said that the director, the deputy director general, SDDG, he said that my password was used for this amount. Yes. Right. So we wrote and said 828. Now, when they checked, despite the fact that the password was used for that amount, 133 million was actually not illegal in the sense that those people had actually supplied or had provided services for that amount of money. So even if it was not his password, right, it was legitimate in the sense that somebody used that probably as a cover. You know how you can have the legitimate invoices and then you add fake invoices in between? So when you're doing the investigation, you separate and say, okay, the password, still the use of the password is wrong, right? In the first stage. Right. Right? Right. But these particular ones would have been legitimate anyway, regardless of who used the password. Because this company was supposed to get that money. But these other ones, nobody can even figure out where they came from. So those are the ones that are under investigation. And by the way, that is from the report of CID, not from us. So it's a letter that came back that said these ones we have been checked and cleared, and then this is what is in the system. So the clearance came from
from, I mean, the devolution ministry must have cleared it. If you're saying the 133 million, these people deserved it either way.
According to the CID.
According to the CID.
The PS did clear them.
The PS did clear them. But was that right? Because here you are complaining that a password was stolen, and the same password was used to clear 133 million, but you stopped the rest. You should have just stopped the whole 828
Actually,
million.
they should have. They should have stopped if they stopped it immediately. You know, if he detected it immediately and stopped the system immediately. If you notice from the time that the password was used to the time I wrote to CID, there is a certain days that have passed. So if you're not aware at the end, right, you can actually end up transacting all the way. But according to the CID report, which we have, they said these ones were approved in the system because the next stages, if they check, they will find documentation. But for the rest, they won't find any documentation for it, and so they won't be able to proceed.
How much would you say you are in the know? You're the cabinet secretary, of course, you deal with policy issues. How much would you say you are in the know in terms of the companies that were going to get these amounts and the tenders they, I mean, whatever they supplied or delivered in terms of goods and services, what they were going to get? How much would you say you're in the know? I mean,
you are never informed as a minister, actually. In fact, for this one, if he hadn't said that his password was used, I wouldn't even be involved. There is, I think in government, I'm sure you're aware that there are clear systems that have been set in terms of accountability and where these finances are concerned, where you have the accounting officer responsible for all financial and accounting matters, and the cabinet secretary responsible for policy. Now, what happens in a ministry for anything procurement and payment, the accounting officer is responsible, and that he delegates the procurement capabilities to what we call the Ministerial Tender Committee. The Ministerial Tender Committee is independent according to the law. It does not report to the minister, and it's composed of, as much as possible, very diverse people from different departments, so that as much as possible you're not able to compromise it. I think the way it's structured, and the law is very clear on how you constitute an MTC. The MTC does not inform the minister when they're procuring, neither do they inform the minister after they've procured or when they're paying. You only get to know if there's a problem
within the service that was supposed to deliver. Right, or the supplies or whatever. But now, if then, I mean, what you're saying is very right, fair enough, but would that then mean for the 133 million who were cleared either way, illegal password or not, I mean, it was an illegal password, you've agreed, they were cleared. Being the cabinet secretary, you're saying you don't know these issues. Could there have been people who made sure those were cleared and probably they were also not validly supposed to get the money, they were not supposed to get that money?
CID will tell us. You know, let me not preempt the report of the CID, because even that is from the interim report of the CID. You know, you write a letter and say, check 820. The CID tells you, by the way, we've checked 820, you still have 633. This 133 have been cleared, and the person who's cleared is so-and-so. That's still interim. Now, you still need to see the final report to see what they are saying about the interim and the process and how that happened. So, you can actually say, yes, it can happen, because it did happen, and it went through the process, but who took it through the process until the end, you would have to wait until the investigations. And of course, no matter what the investigations find out, then action will be taken.
How far or wide is this investigation? Is it everybody in the ministry from the CS down? Because here is Adan Harake, saying his password was stolen.
You know, for you to find out who stole a password, that's a forensic audit.
Would you know who's telling the truth, either way?
They are doing a forensic audit. They will check their computers. They will go into, they're not just doing, they're doing a cybercrime. It's a cybercrime, so they will check fingerprints, and so whoever touches on the system. There are certain people who operate the system and some people don't. So it's not everybody who actually is involved in the payment process. There are quite a number of people who are, but it's not everybody in the ministry who gets involved. So what they do is that they carried all the computers to check actually who did use the password, and they should be able to tell us whether it was actually him who did use his own password, or whether it's somebody else who used the password.
If I could just engage you shortly in some of the issues people have been talking about, and especially the opposition have been very vocal about this. The overpricing of tenders at NYS. I'll quote a few. For example, for a 50-kilogram bag of rice, NYS paid 7,500 shillings, yet it was going for between 3,400 in Nairobi shops or in the supermarkets. The same can be said about 90% kilogram bags of green grams, 24,950. That was the price paid. Yet at the shops, they were selling for about 13,000, almost half that price. Is that something that caught your eye or you're concerned about?
Okay. One, Hussein, when these issues came out in the media, we actually went to check what our prices look like. I asked that there is a review, and I asked to get a report on that, because of course we are going to report in Parliament. And I have here a file which I've submitted also in Parliament showing the real prices. Because as I said, there are some things that are thrown around as allegations, but not necessarily accurate. You can wake up and say, yes, there is overpricing of this much, but let them provide the letter that shows you that there is overpricing of that much. Now, having said that, and also having talked about the independence of the MTC, we've also looked at the prices that NYS has been buying various items and compared them with the supplies branch. The truth is, Hussein, that there are some prices that are higher and there are some prices that are lower, but not to the extent of 100%. 20 to 30%, sometimes 5%, some 6%, and that, if you ask me, is a normal fluctuation. It's what would say they're very similar to what the supplies branch prices are. What is the supplies branch? It's the institution in government that does bulk purchasing, for example. Now, if you compare with the supermarket, prices, supermarket prices, and we actually, and I actually sent people out and told them I want a report including the prices in Nakumatt. After this happened? Yes, in Uchumi, and they gave me a report which is right here. And that's why I think when I talk about allegations, sometimes they are quite grossly exaggerated. You will find that there is a slight deviation. But even if you go to from one supermarket to another, you will find that there are deviations. So you won't find the price of rice exactly the same in Nakumatt and Taskis and Uchumi. And if you look at the deviations, you'll find percentages of maybe 5 to 20-25%, depending on the supermarket that you shopped. And Citizen TV usually does an analysis of a basket of goods and usually gives us comparative prices. So when you use that concept, you will actually see that it is not that the National Youth Service or the ministry consistently has increased prices. In fact, in some commodities, they are 30% lower than the supplies branch and the market. So it depends on, according to them, various factors. When you're buying things off the shelf, for example, in the supermarket, you do not have to consider the cost of money because you're paying in cash and you get your goods immediately. Now, when you're in an institution like National Youth Service, you're expected to provide in bulk, meaning you have to source probably from very far, transport, and you'll have borrowed a certain amount of money for you to be able to deliver, and then you will probably wait 6 to sometimes 8 to 9 months before a payment is done. So any supplier who supplies to a government institution also factors the cost of money. So if you just go to the supermarket and look at what is the price of maize in the supermarket, at that time, and then at that time, and then one more thing, Hussein, if you'll allow me, because because you have said that time. Also, food prices and commodity prices are never fixed. It depends. There are times there is a shortage. So if, for example, we happen to be doing procurement for a certain commodity when there is a shortage, the price will be slightly higher. And my final one is if you look at the MTC, I would have been very concerned if all their prices were consistently higher. But as I told you, some were higher, others were lower. So you cannot quite impute that there was actually any willful wrongdoing. But if anyone thinks that there is, there will be, I mean, there already are ongoing investigations and audits, and you'd have to actually show that there was a collusion between the supplier and the purchaser for you to actually allege corruption. Hussein, if you go to Nakumatt and buy sugar, for example, at 240 shillings, and somebody else buys the same sugar at 200 shillings in Uchumi, it doesn't necessarily mean the one who bought in Nakumatt is corrupt. There could be other factors such as the efficiency that you need to streamline.
But from the documents we have, you're talking about variations of between 30%. Most of them are over 30%.
No, they are not. Not with the documents I have.
Not with the documents you have. Although you're saying investigations will be carried out either way.
You see, the report that I had, because I had to go to Parliament with a report, they had to actually compare their prices and the supplies branch prices. The question now on a few companies that were being given these tenders, companies, I don't know if you're aware of this, companies that have the same names of directors as directors of these companies getting different tenders at NYS.
That was also a cause of concern for many who were asking, how could that happen?
Hussein, that is what is being investigated. If you read, I don't know whether you saw the copy of the CID report, we actually realized that 4 of those companies that are under investigation belong to 3 people, just interchanged with different permutations. So you cannot tell at the point of procurement if you're not part. Let's assume there is a collusion, because it's under investigation. Let's assume that it's under collusion. Unless you're party to the collusion, you wouldn't know that that particular company belongs to those people. I'll give you an example. When you advertise for commodities, let's say food, we get probably applications of about 13,000 applications, and they have to go through the process. So it is possible that if there is people internally who are colluding with suppliers, that they can actually do that. It is possible.
So there could have been problems, then, you agree?
There could be. In fact, on this particular one that is being investigated, it's likely that there is, because you cannot explain why you are paying 4 different companies that belong to the same people this kind of money.
Okay.
Right.
Another question then that is being raised, and I want to come back to that shortly. If I'll come back to the other question, but if these are the problems that were in your ministry, you wrote to the CID, I think it was in June 5th, if I'm not wrong, but the ministry, Harake had wrote to it, I think, in May 25th, if I'm not wrong. Between this time, are you saying, like you have said, there's nothing really leveled against you, although people are still saying you being in charge should take responsibility and step aside?
I mean, Hussein, you're really driving that point.
No, now I'm not driving that point. I'll come to that point later. But now that there were these people in this ministry, using your executive orders or executive powers, why didn't we see heads roll then? Why haven't we seen people being interdicted?
Actually, they have gone. If you have been following this story, Hussein, there are other problems other than this. I'm sure you saw that there are letters that we had written previously about procurement officers and finance officers that had been transferred long before, and they hadn't actually moved. And the correspondence were actually from me saying these people need to move, and they were actually not transferred by me. They're transferred by the National Treasury. They move people around to ensure that we're enhancing governance. So those people have already moved. And then there are other people.
This was a while before this. This was before this problem took place, isn't it?
No, they were still there. The letters I wrote were before, but up to the point when this problem happened, they were still there.
So you believe they're the ones who did this?
I would not want to make that allegation. I am careful not to make that allegation, but what I can say is that those who are supposed to have moved, and there are those who have actually already been removed from the system.
But this was supposed to move because of, I mean, we said it came from Treasury, that they should move. They're not moving necessarily because of what I'm asking, whether you took any action against anybody in the ministry.
That's what I'm saying. This also prompted that action actually was done. If you notice, I had written the letters before, and they hadn't actually been complied with, right? And so when this happened, the first thing I said is that, first of all, anybody who was supposed to have left the ministry should completely move out of the ministry. That's one.
That's fine, yeah.
2, there are certain people who transacted in the system who are under investigation, and those also were removed from the system. So they are not transacting. They're not transacting in the system. They're completely been removed and blocked from the system, so that they do not interfere at all with whatever is going on.
Before this, yeah?
No, this is
during
after.
This, after.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So how hard will it be then to do these investigations that you have now that you've transferred them? How hard or easy will it be?
You know, government and managing public servants is a bit more complicated. As a minister, I cannot suspend officers. Yeah, the Public Service Commission has to do that. So, and for me to tell them to interdict anybody or suspend an officer, you have to provide that report from the CID saying that these people are culpable and therefore they need to. Until that report comes, all you can do is remove them from transacting, right? Until you get the report that says that Hussein, for example, or Jennifer or Mary is involved and therefore they need to stop. So we have to wait until that report comes from the CID.
From some quarters of the country, Waiguru, it has been said, is being protected. That State House talked about this. She's going to respond to that. Because of time, would really love to have this conversation on their own. Because of time, we'll have to move a bit more faster. Like I said just before we went to the break, I'm sure you've heard many people talking, especially the opposition. And of course, this again, coming back to the bar, like you said, the president said about integrity issues, why State House needed to talk about you. In fact, they are saying State House was defending Anne Waiguru. And some have actually gone as far as to ask, do you really have the president's ear?
Hussein, I'm a cabinet secretary, right? And being a cabinet secretary, you consult with the president on a daily basis, just like my colleagues do. And so, I mean, if you say then that we speak to the president and have his ear, I guess all of us as cabinet secretaries have his ear.
Right. Okay, I'll leave it at that. But as much as I've just asked that, you've also heard, I'm sure, that you're the first among equals. I'm sure you've had such people saying that. You're a prime minister of sorts. Like all the ministers look up to you. You're a super minister. In fact, that is the word that has been used.
I don't think so. Do I look like one? I don't think so.
It's not for me to say, really.
No, not at all. I mean, I think in this kind of, the kind of job that I do, you are bound to get people who like you, and then you have people who don't like you. And those who don't like you can say all manner of things. So I don't know why we take them too seriously. Some of those things, you ignore them. They're just like many allegations that are thrown around. So
there's no difference really.
There's no rank.
All right. We
are all cabinet secretaries and we're all equal.
Right. Yeah. This has been asked before. Anne Waiguru, yes, she's a performer. We've seen you're a performer. I mean, with the awards you're winning and everything. But it has been said, and I'm sure you've heard that, Anne Waiguru can tend to be overbearing, abrasive, dictatorial. All those words have been used. Arrogant sometimes in how she deals with people. What would you say to that? I
work hard. And if you're not a hard worker and you're not extremely focused, you can find me a bit like pushy. But I would not say that I am arrogant or abrasive. I think those again sound like the allegations that were there when I was going through a previous similar situation during my...
That was last year, isn't it? I mean, then we also had mythically Nturi saying he was prevailed upon not to drop the motion, the essential motion against you, but that you talked about a while back. I want to talk about an issue that hasn't really been talked about since the EACC list, the so-called, it's not from us, people said it, it's so-called list of shame. The issue about Marianne Kitani, who was the chief of staff, of course she stepped aside at Deputy President's office. What was your relationship with her? And now after it was revealed, because investigations are going on, that she was the one who was behind you being censured.
Hussein, I don't know whether she was. I also read the allegations just like you read them when you saw the list. So I'm really not familiar with that issue at all. Yeah.
Well, what is your relationship with her?
We're colleagues. We're colleagues. Yeah. We work in government. We've worked before. We were together at the initial stages of this government, and we continue to be colleagues.
Okay. There's a question here from, is it Kuria? Kuria in Narrow County, yes. Kuria is saying, and this was one of the things I was supposed to ask actually, it's because of time, P.S. Mangiti, at some point I'm going to come back to the investigation shortly, wrote a letter, say on the 20th of February, to be precise, to the Director General of NYS, and I'll actually want to know, because people have been saying there have been power struggles at the NYS. What is your relationship with the Director? And this letter was to say all procurement issues of more than 2 million shillings be brought might be handled by the Ministry of Devolution. Why was that? Looks like people will say it was micromanaging NYS.
No, let's be clear. NYS is a department, like 7 other departments in the Ministry
of Devolution
and Planning. According to the law, there is what is provided for as a ministerial tender committee. Actually, all tenders of the ministry legally should happen at the ministry level. So whatever it is that used to happen before was actually irregular. So we just rectified it. So what they do is that they allow departments for small amounts to do that within the department, but because of the principles of governance, to separate the user from the person who actually does the transaction, and I'm sure you know about checks and balances, the Ministerial Tender Committee is made independent of the institutions that consume whatever it is that they're asking for. And that's the principle behind setting up an MTC. So that is actually the legal process. That's what is actually supposed to have happened from the beginning. You procure from the ministry, because that is what is provided for by law. And that's why I say sometimes when you read the media reports, they actually make it sound like there's something. There isn't nothing other than making it actually separating the user from the person who's transacting. Just like in the banking system, you have a maker and a checker. So the MTC is like the checker. So you can request, but then they separate the functions. The MTC is an independent institution that carries out the procurement on behalf of the entire ministry, not just National Youth Service. It does that for devolution, it does that for arid land.
So it is for all the departments under Ministry of Devolution.
All the departments under
all of them are under this MTC, Ministry of Youth Committee?
All of them are.
None of them are doing any procurements as we speak? Right. Another question here, as we wind up. Martin in Embu is talking about why you had, I wouldn't want to go into mentioning and to say what exactly he's saying is not very pleasant, but the point he's making here is 49.6 million given to a company for an event that lasted 5 hours, and he's also talking about how much was paid to PR companies, yet we had a communication wing in the Ministry of Devolution.
Hussein, you know, also you have to give the institutions the leeway to make decisions about how they run their programs. And consultancies are carried out in government all the time. If you go to the PPOA website, and that is one of the things I was also providing in Parliament, you will find that every single ministry gets consultancies. What we do is that you assess your internal capacity of the ministry, and then where the internal capacity is not sufficient, especially because either of the uniqueness of the program or the size of the ministry, then you outsource those consultancy services. And if you look, actually, I think, again, the other thing is that consultancies are given according to the scope of work. It's inaccurate to say that an activity costed 46 million. There was no activity that costed 46. That's another lie again. It was, from the reports I've gotten from the team, it was an assignment that lasted a period but culminated in an event that ended on that day, December 12th. So it was not a one-day event. But having said that, if you look, and I've again, with the team, told them to check and compare with other consultancies, you will see consultancies that cost 1 million shillings, some cost 30 million, some cost 100, some cost 900 million shillings, depending on the nature of the consultancy. So I wouldn't want to discuss the size of the consultancy just based on numbers that have been thrown out in the media. Right. Yeah.
As we wind up now, is there a reason, this is another question, why you didn't go to the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission, and the time frame with which we'll see the investigations, being concluded and results, the investigations currently going on?
Or this particular time?
Yes.
Was because this was a cybercrime issue. It was a password issue. You needed first to verify who has done it, because there are different kinds of, there's corruption that requires collusion and all. That usually goes to EACC. But CID and cybercrime deal with things that have to do with systems. And they're the ones actually mandated with anti-money laundering and things like that. So that's why we went
Although
to
it has been said economic crimes can also fall into that purvey.
True, but the people who actually do even if you went to EACC, they would still go to CID and cybercrime to get the data before now you proceed. But if the report comes out and there is allegations, then you expand the scope to all the other independent institutions. Okay.
Finally, we've seen what the opposition has been saying. People may have said, but the opposition has said it. Talking about why, the NYS being something about 2017, being rebellion and all of that, could be used as a militia, could be a long shot, but it's important that you are here to respond to that. And the other thing is people saying the recruitment has not been favoring every part of this country.
Hussein,
including respond to this guy who was talking about Northeastern Province and why it has been neglected.
Hussein, this morning I made a comprehensive report on that issue to Parliament and provided the documentation showing that when we recruit across the country in every constituency, and every constituency gets a similar number of slots, which is 30. In the only place that gets more than 30 is Nairobi, because of course of the population of Nairobi is 4 million, and we have quite a number of informal settlements which have a lot more people. So when it comes to neglect, there is no region really that has been neglected. What happened is that when NYS started recruiting, there wasn't that much enthusiasm because people didn't think much of it. They preferred to join other institutions such as the police or the defense forces. And so in areas such as the Northeastern, we actually didn't even reach in many constituencies the 30 that we required. But the provision was actually given. It's just that they did not come out. And so since it's volunteer,
and it have been important, to find out why they didn't come out and now go and do a robust way of getting them out?
Hussein, we've just been at this thing for 1.5 years, and so we are now getting there. Right now, everybody knows NYS. Now there's a lot more interest, and we expect that there will be a lot more turnout when we are recruiting. And of course, there are special programs that we're already undertaking for the Northeastern and marginalized. We haven't talked about them yet because they are not launched. You will see that the focus really doesn't discriminate any part of the country.
What about this issue of the militia they're talking about?
Certainly not. I don't know how anybody would think that the National Youth Service would end up being a militia. What it does is that if you look at even the theme and the branding of the National Youth Service, we actually are trying to recapture our youth back to what it is, the essence of what it is they should be: patriotic, dedicated, hardworking, disciplined young people. And that has already been achieved in the programs that you have seen. I'm sure you are familiar with what we've done in Kibera, what we've done in other slums, what we're doing across the country. So there is no way, absolutely no way. And the people who are actually like you, for the state, who are watching every single day and everything we do, you'll be able to know that if we had any other intentions other than the noble intentions of ensuring that we're empowering our youth.
All right, we're going to cross over the trends, but let me read this text. Madam Waiguru, why are court luminaries baying for your blood? Do you have political ambition to unseat them in their stronghold, especially in the current NYS project location, or they just have a malice? That is Ahmed from Garissa. And I can ask you that. I mean, I mean, some are accusing you of being arrogant and everything. You've talked about that. And there are some people who say you are really a person who delivers and does the job very well. Would you, do you have any political ambitions in this country?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
Never?
I'm a technocrat. No, never. I don't think I'm cut out for politics.
You don't think you're cut out for politics?
No. I'm a technocrat, and I'm happy to be one.
Okay. Thank you very much. Anne Waiguru, Cabinet Secretary, Interior. One more message. If Anne Waiguru is sure she's clean, why doesn't she step aside to our investigations? You've talked about that. And we have Billy Arocho in Kamkunji saying, Anne Waiguru, you are God-given to the Jubilee government. Keep up the good work. Laini Saba in Kibera, Anita says, the CS should not step aside. The crime rate in Kibera has gone down by 60%. I have personally started business with the money we get for cleanup. The project should continue. That is Anita from Laini Saba in Kibera. We are crossing over now to Willis Traburuf in the newsroom. If the CS would kindly bear with me for another 5 minutes to join us in this. Willis Traburuf, what do we have?
All right, well, very good evening to you, Hussein, and to Mheshimiwa, the Cabinet Secretary of Devolution, and Waiguru. And today, Hussein, we have a little bit something special for Mheshimiwa. Remember, they say Throwback Thursday.
Yes.
And as always, we like to mix things a little bit here in the big question and on trends.
Right.
So we're doing Throwback Tuesday. So the first which I'm going to show is the Devolution Cabinet Secretary as
Don't even
president.
say, don't even say, just show us. Let the people see it. Let her see it.
All right.
Okay.
That is her now.
That is her now.
Okay.
But she's here now.
Yes, and she's here now. So we need her to identify the next picture and help us see
who the
which
next person
one
is.
among these ones.
Oh, God. Oh, my goodness. Where did you get that from? I was in Form 1.
We do a lot of research, Madam Cabinet Secretary. You were in Form 1. Which school was that?
Precious Blood.
Precious
that was our
Blood.
Sunday
So which one?
Where are you? Are you the...
Who is she?
I'm the one on this side.
The tallest one or
the tallest one?
The tallest
and now
one.
I'm the shortest amongst them. Yeah.
Did you ever, I mean, looking at that picture, did you ever think you'll be where you are today? Did you have any ambitions of being a cabinet secretary or being somebody big in the government or minister?
I have been in government for a long time, and I had really wanted to be a PS. I had never thought of being a minister. Yeah. Okay. I mean, it only came recently that you can be a minister and not be a politician. So never really thought about it. But a PS, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Willis. All right. So of course there you have the before and after of the Devolution Cabinet.
She was honest enough to tell us what has changed in her life now that she's a cabinet secretary. Maybe that's a story for another day.
It's interesting that she was in Form 1. She has come a mighty long way, they say. All right. So this is another one. We were told that a little buddy told us that Mheshimiwa likes cute children, and so we picked up a nice small video for her to watch as well, so she can take a look at this.
Do the evil eyes, bro. Give him the evil look. Do the evil eyes, bro. Give him the evil look.
I don't know if you... Maybe I should let you ask a question as regards that. You have a question for the cabinet
Yes,
secretary?
we're just asking, what does she think about that particular video? I see she's smiling.
No, it's funny.
Okay.
All right, well, Hussein, we'll be back a little bit later on with some more trends, but thank you so much, Mheshimiwa, for participating in this particular session. We appreciate you, and thank you, Hussein, as well.
Well, look, thank you, Abu. We'll join you later. We'll look at that photo of you in Form 1. Your life then and now. Just one thing. Is there any one thing you think you miss or has changed since, I mean, you were now with the trappings of power and being a cabinet secretary? What do you miss? What has changed?
I miss the normal life.
You don't have it anymore?
No. You're never alone. You can't do the normal things that everybody does because everything you do is under camera and scrutiny. I miss that.
Okay.
I miss being able to wear what I want and go where I want without anybody asking why is the CS doing
ABCD.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's the tough part.
Cabinet Secretary Anne Waiguru, thank you so much for making time for the big questions tonight. We really appreciate. We know you're busy and you made time for us. We wish we had more time. There are a lot more questions we'd have asked, but we hope you'll come back later.
Certainly.
You will. Thank you so much, Cabinet Secretary Anne Waiguru. Keep talking to us on 22422 and on Twitter using the hashtag The Big Question. We're back after this break.